Welcome back, everyone, to the place where we dive deep into stormy love stories, buried secrets, and the tear-jerking journeys of finding oneself. After that devastating blow, the humble laborer didn't stay down. Instead, he stood up abruptly, his eyes burning with the cold intensity of a king. His memory has returned. The moment Towan choked out the name Diem and pulled her into a tight embrace, the entire orchard went silent with emotion. But even more moving was the sight of the powerful CEO, kneeling down, clutching the weathered hands of the poor old woman, the one who pulled him back from the brink of death. I remember now, Grandma. Thank you for giving me a second chance at life. His memories have found their way home, but the war against his enemies has only just begun. How will Toan use those hands, once bruised from manual labor, to take back everything he lost? An intense and deeply human new chapter officially begins. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon right now to join Diem and Towan on their quest for justice. Your support is what drives us to release the next episode as soon as possible. The old woman's story unfolded like a slow-motion black and white film, recreating that fateful night of blood and fire. As she spoke, the air in the wooden shack grew thick and heavy. Diem sobbed, her hands gripping the hem of her shirt, as if trying to hold back the agonizing pain tearing through her. But for Towan, those words weren't just information. They were powerful electrical pulses firing straight into his damaged memories. Towan stood there, but he no longer saw the wooden shack or the flickering oil lamp. A sudden, violent surge of pain, like a sledgehammer slamming into his brain, made him stumble. Towan gripped his head, a groan escaping through his clenched teeth. Images began flooding back, like a dam breaking, the screech of tires on asphalt, the blinding glare of oncoming headlights, a sinister face hidden behind a mask, and then a massive explosion that turned the whole world upside down. The pain made the nerves in his face twitch uncontrollably. Cold sweat poured off him, soaking through his tattered t-shirt. He felt himself falling into a bottomless abyss where there was nothing but his own screams and one woman's name, Deem. Run. Seeing Toan collapse like a crumbling wall, Deem didn't think twice. She rushed to him, dropping to the dirt floor and throwing her arms around him. Toan. Gone. What's wrong? Stop. Please don't try to remember anymore. Fiends. Diem broke down her sobs, mixing with his heavy, ragged breathing. She pulled his head to her chest, trying to use her own heartbeat to soothe the storm raging inside his mind. She could feel his body shivering in waves, his muscles locked tight in agony. Don't leave me. Once was more than enough, Towan. Diem whispered, her hot tears falling onto his neck and mixing with his sweat. In the midst of the excruciating pain, Towan caught a faint scent of jasmine from Diem's hair. It was the only gentle thing in a memory field full of thorns. He wanted to reach up and hold her, to tell her that he thought he remembered something. But his strength had finally run out. Towan's eyes rolled back and his breathing grew shallower until it finally stopped. He went limp in her arms, his head falling onto her shoulder, heavy and silent. The wooden shack fell into a terrifying silence, broken only by the wind whistling through the cracks in the door and the sound of Deem sobbing. The old woman quickly regained her composure. She hurried into the inner room, and brought out a pouch of brownish-gray herbal powder and a basin of warm water. "Girl, get a hold of yourself. Get him onto the wooden bed, hurry." Her voice was sharp, but full of empathy. Diem and the old woman struggled to hoist Toan's large frame onto the wooden platform. The old woman's hands moved fast, massaging the pressure points on his temples and the back of his neck. She then mixed some of the powder into a cup of water, pried Toan's mouth open, and helped him drink it. He went into severe psychological shock hearing those old stories. His memory is like a wound that was just starting to heal, and you cut it wide open, the old lady said. She chided Deem gently, but her eyes were full of pity. Diem sat motionless beside Toan. She took his rough, calloused hand, the same hand that just months ago was signing million-dollar contracts, but was now weathered by hard labor. She watched his face while he slept. Right now, he didn't look guarded or distant, like he did at the pomelo farm earlier that afternoon. He was her Toan again, the man who sometimes frowned when he was thinking, but always gave her the warmest looks. "You know," Deem whispered into the empty air. "Everyone said you were dead. They held a funeral for you. They fought over your estate. But I never believed them. I went everywhere, knocked on the door of every hospital, every police station, only to be met with head shakes. It turns out fate was hiding you here, in this peaceful place all along." She looked out the window. A crescent moon hung precariously over the branches of a banyan tree. A thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Who did this? Why did Uncle Thu say Toan never actually left the country? Clearly someone had orchestrated a perfect disappearance to get rid of him. As dawn approached, fog blanketed the small farm. Toan's finger twitched. Diem startled awake. She had drifted off by his side without realizing it. Toan slowly opened his eyes. The headache had faded, replaced by a strange sense of emptiness. He saw Diem, her face worn out, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, still clutching his hand, as if she were afraid he'd vanish the moment she let go. "You're still here?" Toan asked, his voice thick and raspy. This time, he didn't use the cold, formal tone from before. "I'm never going anywhere unless you chase me away," Deem replied firmly. Toan sat up, looking down at his hand resting in hers. "Earlier, in my dreams, I saw so much blood. I saw you crying at a wedding with no groom. Do I owe you a lot?" Diem choked back tears. "You don't owe me anything. As long as you come back, nothing else matters." After a simple meal of plain porridge cooked by the old woman, Deem stepped out into the yard where Uncle Thu was waiting. His face was etched with anxiety. "Deem, we have to get Toan back to the city right now. I just got word that they're starting to get suspicious. Someone spotted you in this area." Diem looked back into the house where Toan was helping the old woman chop herbs. The sight of a powerful CEO doing chores in a thatched hut made her heart ache. But she knew that if she took him back now, if he went back now without his memory, he'd be nothing more than a pawn in the hands of his ruthless enemies. No Uncle Thu. "We can't take him back yet." Diem said, her eyes flashing with resolve. "If he doesn't remember who he is, he won't be able to defend himself. And more importantly, I want him to fall in love with me all over again, as the man standing right here, not because of some obligation from the past." Diem walked back inside and stood in front of Toan. "Toan, I have a proposal. You said you're a hired hand here, right? Your farm is short-staffed, and I happen to be looking for work. I'm staying. I'll work with you and live alongside you until you remember everything. If after all, that you still say, you don't know who I am, I'll walk out of your life forever voluntarily. Toan was stunned. He looked at this elegant, refined woman and couldn't believe she was willing to stay in the mud and grime just to be near an amnesiac. You're crazy. You can't handle this kind of hardship. I survived you vanishing for 3 months. Diem smiled a mix of tears and stubbornness in her eyes. There is no hardship left in this world that can break me. Under the old banyan tree, 2 people who once stood at the top of society began a new life as paupers. Diem had no idea that back in the city, Huyen, that poisonous woman, was frantically searching for her. A new manhunt was about to begin, aimed directly at this peaceful farm. After fainting in Diem's arms, Toan woke up as the moon reached its peak. But this time, his eyes weren't clouded by fog or the vacant stare of a nameless man. Toan lay still on the wooden bed, staring up at the thatched roof, where starlight peeked through the gaps. His head still throbbed, but the shattered fragments had finally begun to lock into a complete picture. He remembered everything. He remembered the beachfront villa, where he and Diem used to watch the sunset. He remembered the high-stakes board meetings, where he faced off against ambitious old wolves. And most painfully, he remembered the moment the brakes failed on that mountain pass, the triumphant laugh of the traitorous driver, before he jumped clear, leaving Toan to plunge into the abyss. Toan's arm trembled slightly. He turned to look at Diem. She was asleep beside him, her hair spilled across his arm, her face still traced with the streaks of dried tears. Deem, he breathed. His voice was no longer the gruff tone of a laborer. It carried the authority and deep affection of the man he used to be. He didn't wake her. He only reached out with his rough, sap-stained hand and gently stroked her soft skin. He felt a wave of pure heartache. Because of him, this girl had gone through hell. Because of him, she had searched until she found this godforsaken place. The next morning, when the sound of birds woke Diem, she saw Toan standing in the yard. His back was straight, his shoulders broad. The way he stood, the way he looked out into the distance, he was no longer the timid nobody. Diem walked toward him trembling. Toan, you. Toan turned around. His gaze met hers, deep and burning with passion. He stepped forward and without hesitation pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, as if to make up for every second they were apart. Thought, Diem, I remember. Everything. I remember my office, the ring I was going to propose to you with that day. And I remember the betrayal of the people I once trusted. Diem cried, but this time they were tears of joy. So, are we going back to the city? Uncle Thu has the car ready. Toan stayed silent for a long moment. He looked at his calloused hands, then at the old woman busying herself in the kitchen out back. No, Diem. We're not going back just yet. My enemies think I'm dead, or at the very least that I've completely lost my mind. That's our only advantage. If I show up now with nothing, they'll just take me out again. I need time to reorganize my empire from a distance, and more importantly. Toan lifted Diem's chin and smiled. I want to stay here a little longer. I want to live these simple days with you. No phones, no contracts, just you and me." From that day on, a strange rhythm took over their lives in the countryside. Toan remained a laborer at the pomelo farm, and Deem took a job packing fruit. But beneath that facade of poverty, two brilliant minds were quietly set in motion, orchestrating a plan to take everything back. At 500 Ikonikos AM, Towan and Diem would walk together down the red dirt road, Towan carrying Diem's small lunch pail. At the farm, Towan still took on the heaviest chores, but his mindset had shifted. He observed how the business was run and how the foreman was skimming money off the workers' wages. Once, when the foreman started shouting at a young kid picking up fallen fruit, Toan simply stepped up and looked him dead in the eye, the piercing gaze of a CEO who used to command thousands. The foreman suddenly shivered and went dead silent, having no idea why a common laborer terrified him so much. Diem sat by the large crates of pomelos, her delicate hands growing accustomed to labeling and sorting. During their short breaks, Toan would sneak her a sweet guava or a drink of cool water. "Do you regret this?" Toan asked as they sat back to back under a large tree. "I only regret not finding you sooner." Diem leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the scent of sunshine and honest sweat. Every night, after the old woman had fallen fast asleep, Toan and Uncle Thu would huddle over a secret satellite phone. Toan Huyen's shares in the corporation have climbed to 35%. She's prepping for a major hostile takeover at the end of the month. Uncle Thu's voice crackled seriously over the line. Toan calmly took a sip of strong tea. Let her enjoy her moment. Contact the old shareholders she's been squeezing out. Tell them the lion isn't dead. He's just healing. Diem sat beside him, jotting down the financial data Uncle Thu provided. She became his lead strategist in that tiny thatched hut. Together, they analyzed stock charts on scraps of old paper by the dim flicker of an oil lamp, a striking contrast between high-level intelligence and a humble setting. In a way, this was the happiest time of their lives. There were no fake extravagant parties, just simple meals, cooked by the old woman, the sound of frogs in the fields, and the genuine warmth of being truly on the same side. Late in the afternoon, after the heavy lifting was done, Toan and Diem would head down to the river to wash up, keeping a respectful distance behind some bushes, of course. Toan would catch a few gobies and pick some wild water spinach to brighten up their dinner. The old woman watched the two of them. She knew they didn't belong here, but she saw the change in Toan's eyes. He wasn't a soulless shell anymore. He had a purpose. Grandma Toan said during dinner, "Once everything is settled, I'm going to build you a big brick house with a full herbal garden." The old woman smiled kindly. "I'm old, son. Just seeing the two of you happy is enough for me." At night, as the cold mist settled over the thatched roof, Toan and Diem sat on the porch. Toan took Diem's hands, gently rubbing ointment into the bruises she'd gotten from handling the fruit crates. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry you have to do this." Diem shook her head. "You know when you were missing, I told myself I'd trade my entire fortune just for one more day to see you." Now that I have you back, this is nothing." Toan pulled her close. Their passionate kiss, a symbol of their rebirth, melted into the quiet country night. They knew the storm was waiting for them out there, but now they were an inseparable force. A month passed. Towan's physical strength was fully restored, and his memory was sharper than ever. He had secretly clawed back a significant amount of stock through shadow accounts managed by Uncle Thu. One morning, a sleek black luxury car pulled up quietly at the edge of the village, a sharp contrast to the daily bustle. Uncle Thu stepped out carrying a freshly pressed suit. Towan looked at Diem, then at the old woman. He stripped off his tattered t-shirt, shedding the skin of the laborer. "Diem, it's time to take back what's ours." Towan got into the car, but before leaving, he gave the old woman one last tight hug. He didn't say goodbye, because he knew he'd be back soon to fulfill his promise of the brick house. The car rolled away, leaving a trail of dust in its wake. Inside, Towan gripped Diem's hand. His gaze was as cold as a general's entering his final battle. "Huyen and everyone else who betrayed me, just wait. My return will be your worst nightmare." That day, the sky over the countryside turned unusually gloomy. Dark clouds rolled in from the sea, signaling a violent storm about to hit the farm. Diem was racing to pack the last few crates, but her heart was racing with unease. A woman's intuition told her this fragile peace was over. Toan was carrying the final crate deep into the warehouse. As he set it down, the sound of heavy rhythmic footsteps echoed from the entrance. These weren't the familiar sounds of barefoot workers. They were leather soles hitting the hard ground cold and lethal. 4 men, in black, their faces scarred and stony, filed inside. Leading them was the traitorous driver from that night, the man Towan thought had died in the crash. "You really do have 9 lives, Boss Towan," the driver sneered, twirling a stun baton in his hand. "We've had a hell of a time finding you. Who knew you'd been hiding from your debts as a common grunt all this time?" Towan froze. A sharp sting of recognition raced down his spine. Even though his memory wasn't fully back, his survival instinct kicked in. He stepped back, his hand grasping a wooden plank nearby. "Who are you people?" "We're the guys finishing the job." Before Toan could react, the other 3 lunged. Even with his memory gone, the martial arts skills embedded in his muscle memory allowed him to dodge the first punch. He swung the plank, knocking back the man on his left, but the driver was faster, swinging the stun baton into his ribs. Zap! The massive surge of electricity sent Towan into convulsions, and he collapsed. Immediately, a barrage of violent kicks rained down on his chest and stomach. "Stop it!" A piercing scream rang out. Diem charged in. With no regard for her own life, she used every ounce of her strength to shove the massive men surrounding Toan. She threw herself over his body to shield him, taking a heavy kick square to her shoulder. "Diem, run!" Toan managed to wheeze. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, soaking into the dusty ground. The driver grabbed Diem by the hair, yanking her away. "You bitch, you want to die with him. Let me show you how pathetic your fiancé looks before he takes his last breath." He swung a heavy iron bar, aiming a fatal blow at Towan's head. Crack. The bar slammed into the top of Towan's skull. A horrific pain far beyond human endurance exploded in his brain. But instead of fading out, that blow acted like a sledgehammer, shattering the stone casing around his memory. In that dark moment, a blinding white light appeared. Toan saw at all the car explosion Huyen's face as she signed the decree to seize power, and the promise he made to Diem under the cherry blossom tree. Blood streamed into Toan's eyes, staining his vision red. But within that crimson haze, his eyes suddenly changed. The confusion vanished, replaced by a terrifying, chilling presence as cold as ancient ice. As the driver went to swing the iron bar a second time, Toan's hand shot up, catching the metal with his bare palm. The sound of metal hitting bone and flesh was sickeningly dry. But Toan didn't even flinch. He stood up slowly, his bloodshot eyes locked onto the man in front of him. The driver felt his heart tremble. That look. It was the exact same look of the man who once made the entire business world tremble in fear. You remember, the driver stammered. Toan didn't answer with words. He twisted his wrist, disarming the man, and swung the bar into the driver's leg, sending him crashing to the ground. He moved like a whirlwind, every punch and every kick fueled by the raw fury of a man whose life had been stolen. The thugs began to panic. They realized the man standing before them was no longer the gentle laborer. This was a demon newly freed from its chains. When the last man fled, Toan collapsed beside Diem. He pulled her into his arms with blood-stained hands. I remember, Diem. I remember everything. Diem clung to him, sobbing wordlessly as the mountain rain began to pour, turning the world white. Toan's blood mingled with the rainwater, washing away the grime of his months in exile. Under the violent storm, the man named Toan had truly returned not from death, but from the most painful kind of oblivion. The morning after the assault, Diem carefully bandaged the wound on Toan's head. He sat on the porch, watching the old woman busying herself in her herbal garden. Her hands trembled, and her back seemed a little more hunched after so many nights spent worrying about the grandson she had taken in. Diem stepped out, holding a phone with a secure connection established by Uncle Thu. Toan, the car is waiting at the edge of the village. Uncle Thu says the loyal shareholders are waiting for you to appear so they can turn the tables on Huyen. Let's go. Toan looked at the sleek black car shimmering in the distance, then back at the old woman's frail silhouette. He took Diem's hand, his voice low but resolute. Diem, if I leave now, this house will collapse when the rainy season hits. She saved my life. She shared every bowl of porridge when I was nobody. As an engineer, I can't go off to build multi-million-dollar high-rises while my benefactor's roof is still leaking. He made his decision. He would stay a little longer. Not as the nameless man, but as a true civil engineer, using his mind to repay the debt of gratitude. Toan stopped hauling pomelos. He began using his high-level professional expertise to change the lives of the old woman and the local villagers. Using his small savings and secret help from Uncle Thu to buy materials, Toan personally designed a system to pipe water from the stream to the old woman's garden and the surrounding households. The locals, who only knew manual labor, were stunned to see the porter sketching complex diagrams on the ground. Instead of hiring contractors, Toan did the surveying and structural calculations himself. He worked alongside his former porter friends who had always respected his strength to lay the first bricks. Diem didn't just stand by. She learned to brew tea and cook for the crew, a happy smile always on her face. This period was the most peaceful, quiet before the storm for the two of them. Toan shed the pressure of a CEO and returned to the primal passion of an engineer, the act of creation. Every evening, under the electric lights, Towan had finally wired to the house. The three of them gathered for dinner. The old woman watched the new house take shape with a radiant face. Toan, I knew you weren't ordinary. The way you look at those blueprints, your eyes shine like stars. When you head back to the big city, remember to keep your heart just as bright. Towan smiled, placing a piece of braised fish into her bowl. You gave me a second life, Grandma. This house is just a small part of it. When I leave, I'll send people back to look after your garden so your medicine can save even more people. Despite being in the countryside, Toan stayed perfectly in sync with the world. Every night, he and Deem sat by a laptop, tracking every move made by Huyen and the corporation. He used his engineer's brain to analyze cracks in the projects Huyen was implementing. Look at this Deem. This southern project she's investing in has an unstable foundation on soft soil. She's too greedy and has been cutting corners on materials. This is exactly where we'll strike. Diem looked at him with a surge of admiration. He wasn't just building a house for an old woman. He was building a fortress so that upon their return, no one could ever defeat them again. 3 months later, the sturdy, modern, yet cozy brick house was finished. The old woman's herbal garden was greener than ever, thanks to an intelligent care system. The sky was a brilliant blue that day. Toan put back on the suit Uncle Thu had brought. As he stood in the yard, the aura of a brilliant CEO blended with the ruggedness of a field engineer commanding respect from everyone. He knelt before the old woman. "Stay healthy, Grandma. I'm going back to claim justice, and so I can take better care of you." The old woman, eyes welling with tears, handed him a small pouch of herbs. "Go, my son. Whatever you do, don't let your hands get stained with filth like they did." The car rolled out of the village. Looking through the window, Toan saw the small irrigation works he had built for the community. He gripped Diem's hand tightly. "Are you ready?" Diem asked. "I've finished all the drawings," Toan replied. "Not just for the construction, but the blueprint for the downfall of those who betrayed us." The car sped toward the city where the skyscrapers beckoned. Toan was no longer the man with amnesia, nor was he the laborer. He was Toan, the most brilliant civil engineer, returning to rebuild from the ruins of betrayal.